Hey guys, tonight we dive into a story that's less about epic battles or tragic heroes and more about a god who just couldn't find anything fun to do. Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, parties, and, well, a bit of chaos. Picture this: you're Dionysus, lounging on Mount Olympus, surrounded by endless vineyards and the best wine ever poured, but somehow boredom creeps in like an uninvited guest at a party. So, what does the god of revelry do when the party's lost its spark? He invents theatre. Yes, theatre. The whole shebang of masks, actors, and dramatic monologues, because apparently even gods need a hobby when the wine runs dry. You probably won't survive this night without at least one yawn or a mild existential crisis about how humans have been pretending to be other people for thousands of years. But stick with me, this isn't just a dry history lesson. It's a gentle, winding journey through the sleepy origins of theatre, where boredom meets brilliance, and the god of wine accidentally creates something that will entertain millions for millennia. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where in the world we're drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the ancient hills of Greece, the air thick with the scent of wild thyme and crushed grapes. The sun is setting, casting long shadows over the vineyards that Dionysus himself tends. But tonight, the god isn't celebrating. Instead, he's restless, pacing beneath the olive trees, his usual revelry failing to lift his spirits. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's boredom was a mythological metaphor or a reflection of real cultural shifts in ancient Greece. But the story goes that this divine ennui sparked an idea that would change everything. In a world where gods often meddled in human affairs with thunderbolts or tempests, Dionysus's solution was surprisingly creative: invent a new form of entertainment, one that combines storytelling, music, and dancer, way to capture the wild, unpredictable spirit of life itself. This wasn't just about killing time, it was about crafting an experience that could touch the soul, provoke laughter and tears, and maybe even bring people closer to the divine. Interestingly, the invention of theatre is often linked to Dionysus's festivals, which were rowdy, ecstatic celebrations filled with wine, music, and dancing. These festivals were not just parties, but communal rituals that blurred the line between the mortal and the divine. The idea that theatre emerged from these Dionysian rites is widely accepted, though some scholars debate whether it was a gradual cultural evolution or a sudden creative leap inspired by the god's boredom. So, as night falls and the first stars twinkle overhead, you find yourself at the edge of a clearing where a small group of villagers gather. They're about to perform something newer chorus of singers and dancers honoring Dionysus, telling stories through song and movement. It's humble, raw, and a little chaotic, but it's the seed of what will become one of humanity's greatest artistic traditions. And just like that, from the god's restless mind and a few curious mortals, theatre is born not with a grand proclamation, but with a simple, joyful noise that echoes through the hills. You find yourself stepping deeper into the world of early Greek theatre, where things are still delightfully rough around the edges. Imagine a time when theatre wasn't the polished, scripted performances you might picture, but rather a wild, communal experience centered around the Dithyramba choral hymn sung in honor of Dionysus. These weren't your average campfire songs. They were loud, ecstatic, and often quite messy, blending music, dance, and storytelling in a way that felt more like a ritual than a show. The dithyrambs were performed by large choruses, sometimes up to 50 men, who would sing and dance in a circular formation. The energy was contagious, drawing the community together in a shared frenzy of celebration. This is where theatre's roots dig deep into the soil of religious devotion and collective ecstasy. Historians still argue whether these early performances were purely religious ceremonies or if they already contained the seeds of dramatic storytelling as we understand it today. What's quirky here is that these dithyrambs were sometimes so wild that they could last for hours, with participants losing themselves in the music and movement, almost like an ancient version of a music festival, Reveminus the Glowsticks, of course. The idea was to honour Dionysus by embodying his spirit of chaos and joy, blurring the lines between performer and audience, mortal and god. As you watch, you notice how the chorus doesn't just sing. They interact with the crowd, responding to the mood and even improvising lines. This fluidity is key to understanding. Early theaterit wasn't a fixed script, but a living, breathing performance shaped by the moment. The chorus served as a communal voice, narrating stories that often revolved around mythic themes connected to Dionysus's own adventures. Interestingly, the transition from these choral hymns to structured drama is credited to a few key innovations. One of the biggest leaps was the introduction of individual performers stepping out from the chorus to take on specific roles. This shift began to create the dialogue and character-driven plots that define theatre today. But back in the dithyramb days, it was all about the collective experience, the swirling energy of voices and bodies moving as one. You also learn that the festivals where these performances took place, like the city Dionysia in Athens, were massive social events. People from all walks of life gathered to celebrate, watch, and participate. These festivals were more than just entertainment. They were a vital part of civic life, blending religion, politics, and art in a way that feels surprisingly modern. So, as the chorus's song fades into the night, you realize you've witnessed the humble beginnings of a tradition that would grow to shape Western culture. From these wild communal hymns to the carefully crafted plays of later centuries, theatre's journey starts here, in the ecstatic heart of Dionysian worship. You're standing at the edge of that same Dionysian festival, the night air still buzzing with the fading echoes of the chorus's song. Suddenly, something new happens. Our man steps forward from the swirling mass of voices and movement. This is Thespis, often called the first actor in history, and his bold move changes everything. Instead of blending into the chorus, he speaks alone, adopting a character and telling a story through dialogue. It's a small step for man, but a giant leap for theatre. Thespis' innovation might sound obvious now, but back then it was revolutionary. Imagine the shock of the crowd when one voice broke away from the collective, creating a new kind of storytelling that focused on individual characters and their emotions. This moment marks the birth of what we now call drama, and it's why actors are sometimes called thespians, today a direct nod to this ancient pioneer. Historians still argue whether Thespis was a real person or a legendary figure created to explain the origins of acting, but the impact of this shift is undeniable. By stepping out of the chorus, Thespis introduced the idea of impersonation, where one person could embody another, allowing stories to become more complex and engaging. Suddenly, theatre was no longer just a communal hymn, but a stage for conflict, emotion, and character development. What's delightfully quirky is that Thespis supposedly wore a mask with a large mouthpiece to project his voice, a kind of ancient megaphone. This wasn't just practical, it symbolized the transformation from individual to character, from human to mythic figure. Masks would go on to become a staple of Greek theatre, allowing actors to play multiple roles and express exaggerated emotions visible even to the back rows of massive amphitheatres. You might also be surprised to learn that early actors like Thespis often performed solo, interacting with the chorus, but not yet with other actors. The idea of multiple actors on stage didn't come until a bit later, when playwrights like Aeschylus introduced a second actor, allowing for dialogue and dramatic tension. But Thespis' solo performances laid the groundwork for all of this. As you watch Thespis perform, you notice the crowd's reaction shifts from passive listening to active engagement. People laugh, gasp, and even shout encouragement. This new form of storytelling feels more immediate, more alive. It's as if the god Dionysus himself is smiling, pleased that his boredom has sparked something so captivating. And so, with one man's daring step forward, the chorus's collective voice gains a new dimension. Theatre begins its transformation from ritualistic song to dramatic performance, setting the stage for centuries of storytelling that will explore the depths of human experience. You're now stepping into the colourful, slightly surreal world of ancient Greek theatre, where masks and costumes aren't just props, they're magical tools that transform actors into gods, heroes, or downright fools. Imagine slipping on a mask that instantly changes your voice, your face, your very identity. That's exactly what happened on those dusty stages, and it's a tradition that shaped theatre for centuries. Masks were essential because theatres were hugesome, could hold up to 15,000 spectators, and actors needed to project not just their voices, but emotions to the very back row. These masks had exaggerated features, wide eyes, open mouths, and sometimes even detachable parts to amplify sound. You might chuckle at the idea of ancient actors walking around with giant grins or frowns plastered to their faces, but these masks were serious business. They helped the audience instantly recognize whether a character was joyful, angry, or tragic. Interestingly, the use of masks also allowed a small number of actors, usually three to, play multiple roles. One moment you'd see a heroic king, the next a sneaky servant, all portrayed by the same person just by switching masks and costumes. This efficiency was necessary because early Greek theatre had strict limits on the number of actors, so versatility was key. Historians still argue whether the masks were originally made from stiffened linen, wood, or even cork. But what's clear is that they weren't just practical, they were deeply symbolic. Wearing a mask was like donning a new persona, a way for actors to step out of themselves and into the mythic world of the story. Some scholars suggest that this act of transformation connected the performers to Dionysus himself, who was known for his shape-shifting and boundary-breaking nature. Costumes added another layer of meaning. Actors often wore padded suits to appear larger than life, emphasizing the grandeur or grotesqueness of their characters. High boots called cothurni gave tragic actors extra height, making them loom over the chorus and audience alike. You can't help but imagine how surreal it must have been to watch these towering figures, masked and booming, striding across the open-air stage. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some masks had built-in megaphones to help project voices, which might explain why ancient Greek actors had such famously loud and clear delivery. And yes, shouting your lines across a stone amphitheatre without a microphone was a serious skill. No wonder they trained their voices like Olympic athletes. So, as you watch an actor don a mask and transform before your eyes, you're witnessing more than just a costume change. You're seeing the birth of theatrical magic, where identity is fluid and the boundaries between human and divine blur. This tradition of masks and transformation is one of theatre's oldest tricks, and it all started because Dionysus, bored out of his godly mind, needed a new way to entertain himself and the world. You're swept into the heart of the Dionysian festivals, those legendary parties that were part religious ritual, part wild celebration, and part theatrical incubator. Imagine a city buzzing with excitement, streets filled with people decked out in wreaths of ivy and grape leaves, the air thick with the scent of wine and incense. These festivals weren't your average backyard BBQs. They were massive, days-long events that blended worship, entertainment, and civic pride. The most famous of these was the City Dionysia in Athens, a grand festival held every spring. It was here that theatre truly found its footing, emerging from the chaos of wine-soaked revelry into a structured art form. The festival included processions, sacrifices, and competitions where playwrights would present their newest works to eager audiences. It was a big deal. Think of it as the Oscars, the Super Bowl, and a religious ceremony rolled into one. What's quirky is how these festivals combine the sacred and the profane. On one hand, people prayed to Dionysus for fertility, good harvests, and protection. On the other, they indulged in drinking, singing, dancing, and sometimes downright rowdy behavior. This duality reflects Dionysus's own nature as a god of joy and madness, order and chaos. Historians still argue whether the theatrical performances were primarily religious offerings or early forms of public entertainment, but the line was definitely blurry. During the festival, the theatre became a place where the community could explore complex themes: life, death, justice, and the gods through stories performed on stage. The plays were often deeply emotional, designed to provoke catharsis, a kind of emotional cleansing that left audiences feeling renewed. It's fascinating to think that what started as a god's boredom-fueled invention became a tool for societal reflection and personal transformation. One quirky tidbit: the actors and chorus members were often citizens chosen by lot, not professional performers. So, your neighbour might suddenly find themselves playing a tragic hero or a comic fool, which probably made for some entertaining rehearsals. Also, since women were excluded from performing, the entire festival was a male-dominated affair, which adds an interesting layer to how these stories were told and received. As the festival reached its climax, the city would be alive with anticipation. The grand amphitheatre filled with thousands of spectators, all eager to witness the latest plays. The atmosphere was electric, part spiritual, part theatrical, part party, and through it all, Dionysus's spirit hovered, reminding everyone that life's pleasures and pains are inseparable, just like the god's own contradictory nature. So, as you settle into this ancient celebration, you realize that these festivals were more than just entertainment. They were a vital part of Greek culture, a space where the divine and human dance together in stories that continue to resonate thousands of years later. You're now stepping into the shadowy world of tragedy, where ancient Greek playwrights took the myths and rituals surrounding Dionysus and transformed them into powerful stories that tugged at the heartstrings and stirred the soul. Tragedy wasn't just about sad endings. It was a ritualized experience that connected audiences to the divine and to the deepest parts of themselves. The roots of tragedy lie in myth and religious rites, particularly those honoring Dionysus. These stories often retold the adventures and misfortunes of gods and heroes, weaving in themes of fate, justice, and human suffering. Watching a tragedy was like participating in a sacred ceremony, a way to confront life's harsh realities while seeking understanding and catharsis, a cleansing of emotions. Historians still argue whether early tragedies were more like sermons or dramatic storytelling, but what's clear is that they were deeply intertwined with religious practice. The playwrights borrowed from well-known myths, giving audiences a familiar framework while exploring complex moral and philosophical questions. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the chorus in tragedy originally represented the collective voice of the community, or even the god Dionysus himself, commenting on the action and guiding the audience's emotional journey. This blending of narrative and ritual created a unique theatrical experience unlike anything else in the ancient world. The emotional power of tragedy comes from its ability to portray characters caught in impossible situations, often facing divine forces beyond their control. You might feel sympathy for a hero doomed by fate, or horror at the consequences of human hubris. This emotional roller coaster wasn't just for entertainment, it was a way for ancient Greeks to explore the limits of human experience and the mysteries of the gods. Interestingly, the structure of tragedy was quite formalized, with a prologue, episodes, choral odes, and an exodus. This format helped guide the audience through the story's emotional peaks and valleys, creating a rhythm that mirrored the ebb and flow of human life. As you watch a tragedy unfold, you notice how the playwrights used language, music, and movement to heighten the emotional impact. The actors' masked faces and amplified voices combined with the chorus's haunting songs to create an immersive experience that could leave audiences breathless. So, from the wild festivals of Dionysus to the solemn stages of tragedy, theatre evolved into a profound art form that grappled with life's biggest questions. And it all started because a bored god decided to invent a new way to entertain himself and everyone else. You're now stepping into a slightly lighter corner of ancient Greek theatre, where comedy crashes the solemn party of tragedy with a wink, a nudge, and a whole lot of silliness. Comedy wasn't just the fun sidekick to tragedy. It was a vital part of the Dionysian festivals, offering a playful, often biting counterpoint to the serious themes on stage. Comedy began as a way to poke fun at gods, politicians, and everyday life, turning the sacred into the ridiculous and the powerful into the absurd. Imagine a crowd roaring with laughter as actors dressed in ridiculous costumes mock the latest political scandal or exaggerate the quirks of their neighbours. It was a release valve for social tensions, a way for people to laugh at themselves and their world. Historians still argue whether early comedy was more improvisational or scripted, but what's clear is that it thrived on sharp wit, slapstick humour, and bold satire. The plays often featured stock characters like the braggart soldier, the clever slave, or the foolish old man who found themselves in ridiculous situations that highlighted human folly. One quirky tidbit: Aristophanes, one of the most famous ancient comic playwrights, was known for his outrageous jokes and political commentary, sometimes so cutting that he got in trouble with the authorities. His plays are full of puns, scatological humour, and surreal scenarios like a chorus of frogs croaking their way through the night, or a debate between clouds and birds. Comedy also played with the conventions of theatre itself, breaking the fourth wall and directly addressing the audience. Actors might mock the playwright, the judges, or even Dionysus, creating a lively, interactive atmosphere that felt more like a party than a formal performance. The physicality of comedy was just as important as the words. Actors used exaggerated gestures, pratfalls, and masks with grotesque features to amplify the humour. The masks here were often more caricatured than in tragedy, emphasizing the ridiculousness of the characters. As you watch a comedy unfold, you realize it's not just about laugh sits, a way for the community to process its anxieties and frustrations through humor. It's a reminder that even in the face of life's challenges, laughter can be a powerful healing force. So, while Dionysus might have invented theatre out of boredom, comedy ensured it never got too serious for too long. It's the cheeky, irreverent sibling of tragedy, keeping the spirit of the god of wine alive with every joke and pratfall. You find yourself wandering through the open-air theatres of ancient Greece, where the physical space itself is a marvel that shaped the entire theatrical experience. Early performances took place on simple hillsides, natural slopes that provided a perfect amphitheatre for audiences to gather and watch. Imagine sitting on a grassy incline, the sun warming your back, as actors perform below with the sky as their ceiling. As theatre grew in popularity, these natural settings evolved into purpose-built stone amphitheatres, architectural wonders designed to hold thousands of spectators. The theatre of Dionysus in Athens, for example, could seat up to 17,000 people. The design was ingenious. A circular orchestra where the chorus performed, tiered seating rising steeply to ensure everyone had a clear view, and excellent acoustics that allowed even the softest whisper to carry across the crowd. Historians still argue whether the architectural innovations were primarily driven by practical needs or by symbolic intentions to connect the audience with the divine. Some suggest that the circular orchestra represented the eternal cycle of life and death, a fitting stage for Dionysian drama. What's quirky is that these theatres were open to the sky, so performances were at the mercy of the weather. A sudden rainstorm could send actors scrambling, and the sun's glare might blind the audience or performers alike. Yet, this openness also connected the performance to nature and the gods, making the experience immersive and unpredictable. The sheer scale of these theatres also influenced acting styles. With thousands watching, actors had to exaggerate their gestures and project their voices powerfully. This necessity helped shape the grand, stylized performances that became a hallmark of Greek theatre. Interestingly, some theatres were built into the landscape so seamlessly that they almost disappear into the hillsides, blending human creativity with natural beauty. This harmony between architecture and environment reflects the ancient Greeks' deep respect for nature and their gods. As you settle into your stone seat, you can't help but feel the weight of history around you, the thousands who came before, the gods watching from above, and the actors who brought myths to life on this very stage. The theatre wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing part of the community, a sacred space where stories, gods, and people intertwined. And so, the physical stage of Greek theatre wasn't just a backdrop, it was a vital character in the unfolding drama, shaping how stories were told and experienced for centuries to come. You're now focusing on the chorus, the unsung multitaskers of ancient Greek theatre who weave together music, movement, and narrative into a seamless whole. Picture a group of about 12 to 15 performers, moving in unison, singing, chanting, and dancing, their voices rising and falling like the tides. The chorus isn't just background noise. It's a vital storyteller, commentator, and emotional guide all rolled into one. The chorus's origins lie in those early dithyrambs we talked about, the wild choral hymns to Dionysus. Even as theatre evolved, the chorus remained central, acting as the communal voice of the city or the gods, reflecting on the action and sometimes interacting with the main characters. Their songs, called choral odes, punctuated the drama, giving audiences moments to reflect or feel the mood shift. Historians still argue about the exact function of the chorus. Was it a moral compass, a narrative device, or simply entertainment? It probably served all these roles, depending on the play and the playwright's intentions. Here's a quirky tidbit. The chorus often wore masks and elaborate costumes, just like the actors, but their movements were highly stylized, almost ritualistic. They used synchronized steps and gestures that might remind you of a modern dance troupe, but with a sacred, almost hypnotic quality. This blend of music, poetry, and dance made the chorus a powerful emotional force. The chorus also helped fill in background information, explain complex plot points, and set the tone. In some plays, the chorus represented specific groups elders of the city, soldiers, or even abstract concepts like fate or conscience. Their presence reminded the audience that the story was part of a larger social and cosmic order. You might be surprised to learn that the chorus sometimes engaged in direct dialogue with the actors, creating a dynamic interplay that added depth to the performance. Their voices could be soothing, ominous, or jubilant, shifting the atmosphere with every song. As you watch the chorus move and sing, you realize they're more than just performers, they're the heartbeat of the play, connecting the audience to the story's emotional and spiritual core. Without them, Greek theatre would lose much of its power and resonance. So, next time you think of ancient theatre, remember the chorus, those multitasking, mask-wearing storytellers who brought myth and ritual to life through song and dance, keeping Dionysus's spirit alive in every performance. You're now stepping into the paradoxical world of Dionysus himself, the god whose dual nature joy and madness shaped the emotional landscape of Greek theatre. Imagine a deity who embodies both ecstatic celebration and terrifying frenzy, whose presence can bring both laughter and chaos. This duality isn't just a mythological quirk, it's the emotional engine driving the stories performed on stage. Dionysus's joyful side is easy to picture. Wine flowing freely, music filling the air, and people dancing with abandon. He's the life of the party, the god who breaks down social barriers and invites everyone to join in the revelry. But beneath this surface lies a darker, more unsettling aspect: madness, possession, and loss of control. This side of Dionysus reminds us that joy can tip into chaos, and that the line between ecstasy and madness is thin. Historians still argue whether this dual nature was a reflection of actual ancient experiences with intoxication and ritual frenzy, or a symbolic way to explore human psychology. Either way, it's clear that Dionysus's contradictions influenced the emotional range of Greek plays, which could swing from comedic hilarity to tragic despair. This duality is evident in the theatre's structure itself. Tragedies often explore the consequences of losing control characters driven mad by God's fate or their own flaws. Comedies, on the other hand, celebrate the absurdity of life and the joy of breaking rules, echoing Dionysus's playful side. A quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe that the ritual dances performed during Dionysian festivals were designed to induce trance-like states, allowing participants to experience a form of divine madness. This connection between theatre, ritual, and altered states of consciousness adds a fascinating layer to how we understand these ancient performances. As you watch a play unfold, you might sense this emotional roller coaster, the push and pull between order and chaos, reason and madness. It's as if Dionysus himself is guiding the audience through a journey that mirrors life's unpredictable twists. So, the next time you think about theatre, remember that it's not just stories on a stage, it's a reflection of a god who embodies the wild, joyful, and sometimes terrifying complexity of human experience. You find yourself peering behind the scenes of ancient Greek theatre, where the glaring absence of women on stage raises questions that historians still debate today. In a world where gods and heroes took centre stage, women's roles were played exclusively by men, a practice that might strike you as both baffling and frustrating. Imagine a troupe of male actors donning masks and costumes to portray female characters, their voices pitched higher and gestures softened to mimic womanhood. This exclusion wasn't just a theatrical convention, it reflected broader societal norms in ancient Greece, where women's public presence was limited and their participation in civic life was minimal. Theatre, despite its communal and religious roots, was no exception. Women were generally barred from performing, attending certain festivals, or even voting on plays. Historians still argue about the reasons behind this exclusion. Some suggest it was about maintaining social order and gender roles, while others believe it was tied to religious purity laws or concerns about propriety. Whatever the cause, the result was a male-dominated stage where women's stories were filtered through male perspectives. Here's a quirky tidbit. Despite their absence from the stage, women's lives and experiences were often central themes in plays. Tragedies frequently explored the struggles, desires, and tragedies of female characters. Think Medea's fierce revenge or Antigone's moral courage. So, while women didn't perform, their stories were vividly brought to life, albeit through male voices. Some scholars also debate whether women might have participated in certain ritualistic or choral roles during festivals, though evidence is sparse and contested. The idea that women could have had a hidden or symbolic presence in theatre adds an intriguing layer to the history. As you imagine these masked men playing women, you realize that ancient Greek theatre was a complex reflection of its society celebrating human experience while also reinforcing certain limitations. This gender dynamic shapes how we understand the plays and the culture that produced them. So, while Dionysus's invention of theatre brought countless stories to life, it also mirrored the inequalities of its time, leaving us to ponder how performance both reflects and shapes society. You're now stepping into the world of the great playwrights Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, those towering figures who shaped Greek tragedy into an art form that still resonates today. Imagine three men, each with a unique voice and vision, writing stories that explore fate, justice, and the human condition. Their plays performed in the very theatres born from Dionysus's restless creativity. Aeschylus, often called the father of tragedy, was the first to add a second actor, creating dialogue and dramatic tension that transformed the chorus-centered performances into dynamic storytelling. His plays, like the Oresteia trilogy, delve into themes of justice and divine law, exploring how humans grapple with the god's will. Sophocles, the master of character and plot, introduced a third actor and painted his characters with psychological depth. His famous works, such as Oedipus Rex and Antigone, examine fate, free will, and moral dilemmas, making audiences question the nature of knowledge and responsibility. Euripides, the most modern of the trio, pushed boundaries by portraying gods and heroes with human flaws and emotions. His plays often challenged traditional values, highlighting the struggles of women, the marginalized, and the irrational side of human nature. Medea's fierce revenge and the raw emotion of the Bacchae reflect this complexity. Historians still argue about the extent to which these playwrights reflected or challenged Athenian society, but their influence on drama and storytelling is undisputed. Their works were performed at the city Dionysia, where competition was fierce and winning was a prestigious honour. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sophocles was also a statesman and general, juggling politics with playwriting talk about multitasking. Euripides, on the other hand, was sometimes criticised for being too radical or cynical, earning a reputation as the bad boy of Greek theatre. As you imagine these playwrights crafting their stories, you realise they weren't just entertainers, but thinkers and provocateurs, using theatre to explore the deepest questions of life and society. Their legacy echoes through centuries, reminding us that storytelling is a powerful way to understand ourselves and the world. So, the next time you watch a tragic play, remember these pioneers who took Dionysus's spark of invention and turned it into a blazing fire of human drama. You're now stepping into the buzzing political arena of ancient Athens, where theatre wasn't just about gods, and mythsit was a subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, platform for political commentary. Imagine sitting in the packed amphitheatre during the city Dionysia, surrounded by citizens eager not only for entertainment, but also for sharp insights into their city's leaders, policies, and social issues. Playwrights cleverly used their dramas to critique politicians, question societal norms, and explore the consequences of power. Tragedies often depicted rulers struggling with justice and morality, while comedies took a more direct approach, lampooning public figures and current events with biting humour. This theatrical dialogue with politics made the stage a vital part of Athenian democracy. Historians still argue how much influence theatre had on public opinion and policy, but it's clear that playwrights walked a fine line between artistic expression and political risk. Some faced backlash or censorship, while others enjoyed the protection of their popularity and the god Dionysus's favour. A quirky tidbit: Aristophanes' comedies are famous for their fearless satire. In one play, he mocks the philosopher Socrates, portraying him as a ridiculous figure who confuses and bewilders the youth. This kind of playful yet pointed critique shows how theatre could shape public discourse. The theatre's role as political commentary also highlights the importance of the audience, who were not passive consumers, but active participants in the civic conversation. Their reactions, laughter, applause, or boosgood influenced the success and impact of a play. As you imagine the actors delivering lines that resonate with current events, you realise that ancient Greek theatre was more than art. It was a forum where ideas clashed and society reflected on itself. This tradition of political theatre continues today, reminding us that storytelling is a powerful tool for change. So, as Dionysus's invention evolved, it became not just a source of entertainment, but a mirror held up to society, reflecting its virtues and flaws with wit and wisdom. You're now witnessing one of ancient theatre's most dramatic inventions, the deus ex machina, or God from the machine. Picture this: a tense, complicated plot reaches its breaking point, and suddenly a god appears out of nowhere, lowered onto the stage by a crane-like device to untangle the mess and deliver a neat, divine resolution. It's the ancient equivalent of a plot twist that makes you both gasp and roll your eyes. This theatrical gadget was literally a mechanical crane called the mechane, used to lift actors playing gods above the stage. The term deus ex machina comes from this practice, describing those moments when a seemingly unsolvable problem is resolved by an unexpected divine intervention. It's a clever way to remind the audience that the gods are watching and sometimes stepping in to set things right, or at least to keep the story moving. Historians still argue whether the frequent use of deus ex machina was a sign of playwrights running out of ideas, or a deliberate artistic choice to emphasize the power of fate and the gods. Some critics mock it as a lazy storytelling device, while others appreciate its symbolic weight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Aristotle, the famous philosopher and early theatre critic, mentioned deus ex machina in his writings, noting that while it can be effective, it should be used sparingly to avoid undermining the plot's credibility. So even back then, audiences and thinkers had mixed feelings about this dramatic contraption. You might chuckle, imagining the stagehands hoisting a god in full costume, complete with flowing robes and a thunderbolt prop, descending just in time to save the day. It's a theatrical spectacle that combines technology, religion, and storytelling in a uniquely Greek way. As you watch a play unfold with this divine intervention, you sense the tension between human agency and divine will, central theme in Greek drama. The Deus ex machina reminds everyone that no matter how clever or determined mortals are, the gods still hold ultimate power. So, while Dionysus's boredom sparked the invention of theatre, the gods themselves often made sure the stories stayed unpredictable and larger than life, sometimes literally swinging in from above. You're now tracing the fascinating journey of Greek theatre as it spreads beyond the sun-drenched hills of Athens, influencing cultures and civilizations across the Mediterranean and even further. Imagine the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, not confined to their original stages, but travelling with merchants, soldiers, and scholars, carried like precious seeds to fertile new lands. The most significant immediate impact was on Roman drama. The Romans, great admirers and often adapters of Greek culture, adopted and transformed Greek theatrical forms. While Roman theatre developed its own characteristics, like a greater emphasis on spectacle and less on choral elements, the fundamental structures of tragedy and comedy, the use of masks, and the themes of fate and morality all owe a huge debt to their Greek predecessors. Historians still argue about the precise mechanisms of this cultural transmission. Was it primarily through direct performance, the circulation of written texts, or simply the pervasive influence of Greek ideas? It was likely a combination of all three, with travelling troupes performing Greek plays in new languages and local playwrights creating their own works inspired by Hellenic models. Here's a quirky tidbit. One of the ways Greek theatre spread was through the conquests of Alexander the Great. As his empire expanded, Greek language and culture, including theatre, followed. New cities built theatres in the Greek style, from Egypt to Afghanistan, turning these performance spaces into symbols of Hellenistic influence. Imagine Greek plays being performed in front of diverse, multicultural audiences across vast distances. The spread of Greek theatre wasn't just about entertainment, it was a vehicle for transmitting Greek values, myths, and philosophical ideas. It helped create a shared cultural vocabulary across different peoples, fostering a sense of Hellenistic identity. As you consider the widespread influence of Dionysus's invention, you realize that theatre became a powerful tool for cultural exchange and diffusion. It wasn't just about a play in one city. It was about a way of seeing the world, a method of storytelling that resonated with diverse audiences and planted seeds for future theatrical traditions. So, from a bored god's whim to a global cultural phenomenon, Greek theatre's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of stories to transcend borders and time. You're now tuning in to the vibrant sensory world of ancient Greek theatre, where music and dance weren't just add-ons, but integral parts of the performance that elevated storytelling into a full-bodied experience. Imagine the stage alive, with the rhythmic beat of drums, the haunting melodies of flutes, and the swirling movements of the chorus, all combining to create an atmosphere that's as much felt as seen. Music in Greek theatre was closely tied to poetry and rhythm, with actors and chorus members often singing or chanting their lines rather than speaking them in a modern sense. This musicality helped convey emotion and meaning, turning words into a kind of ritual soundscape that engaged the audience on multiple levels. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the music, what instruments were used, how the melodies sounded, and how much improvisation was involved. But it's clear that music was central to the theatrical experience. The aulos, a double-reeded instrument, somewhat like an oboe, was commonly used, along with percussion instruments that kept the chorus in sync. Dance was equally important. The chorus's movements were carefully choreographed, ranging from solemn processions to ecstatic leaps and spins that mirrored the emotional tone of the play. These dances weren't just decorative. They helped tell the story, express feelings, and create a dynamic visual rhythm that complemented the spoken or sung text. A quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the chorus's dance steps were linked to ancient ritual dances performed during Dionysian festivals, meaning that theatre was literally dancing its religious roots. The physicality of these performances could induce trance-like states, connecting performers and audience to the divine. As you watch the interplay of music, dance, and drama, you realize that Greek theatre was a multisensory spectacle designed to immerse its audience fully. It wasn't just about words on a page, but about creating a living, breathing ritual that touched the body and soul. So, Dionysus's invention wasn't just a new way to tell stories, it was a holistic art form that combined sound, movement, and narrative into a powerful communal experience that still echoes in performance arts today. You're now stepping into the fierce, competitive world of ancient Greek theatre contests, where playwrights didn't just write for fun, they battled for glory, prizes, and the favour of both the gods and the audience. Picture a packed amphitheatre buzzing with anticipation as three playwrights present their best tragedies or comedies in a high-stakes showdown that could make or break their careers. These contests were a central feature of festivals like the City Dionysia, where each playwright submitted a trilogy of tragedies and a satyr play or a series of comedies to be judged by a panel. Winning was a prestigious honour that brought fame, political influence, and sometimes even financial rewards. Historians still argue about the exact criteria judges used. Was it the quality of the writing, the performance, the innovation, or simply audience reaction? Probably a mix of all these factors. What's clear is that the pressure to impress pushed playwrights to innovate and refine their craft, leading to some of the greatest works of classical literature. Here's a quirky tidbit. Competition could get intense, with rival playwrights reportedly sabotaging each other's reputations or performances. Aristophanes, for example, didn't hold back in mocking his rivals on stage, turning the contest into a theatrical soap opera. The audience played a crucial role, too, their cheers or boos influencing the judges and the atmosphere. Theatre was a communal event where everyone's voice mattered, and the energy in the amphitheatre could be electric. As you imagine the tension and excitement of these contests, you realize that ancient Greek theatre was not just an art but a sport, a public spectacle where creativity met competition. This spirit of rivalry and excellence helped theatre evolve into a dynamic and enduring tradition. So Dionysus's invention sparked not only storytelling but also a vibrant culture of artistic competition that continues to inspire creators today. You find yourself amidst the lively crowd in an ancient Greek amphitheatre, where the audience is far from passive observers, they're active participants in the theatrical experience. Imagine thousands of Athenians, from aristocrats to common folk, reacting vocally to the unfolding drama, their cheers, laughter, and jeers filling the open-air space like another layer of the performance itself. The audience's role was crucial. They didn't just watch the play, they engaged with it. They could shout advice to actors, heckle performers, or express approval with applause and cheers. This interaction created a dynamic atmosphere, blurring the line between performer and spectator. The energy of the crowd could influence the actor's delivery and even the overall tone of the performance. Historians still argue about how spontaneous or scripted these audience interactions were. Some suggest that certain responses were expected or even encouraged, while others believe the crowd's reactions were genuinely unpredictable. Either way, the audience's voice was a powerful force in the theatre. Here's a quirky tidbit. There are records of spectators throwing ancient equivalents like small fruits or vegetable-sat actors they disliked. So, heckling wasn't just verbal, it could get physical, turning the theatre into a lively, sometimes chaotic space. The audience also played a role in judging the plays during festivals, their reactions helping to sway the judges' decisions. This communal involvement made theatre a truly democratic art form, reflecting the participatory nature of Athenian society. As you soak in the crowd's vibrant responses, you realize that ancient Greek theatre was a shared experience, a conversation between actors and audience that made each performance unique. This interactive spirit helped theatre remain relevant and alive, connecting people through stories and emotions. So, the next time you watch a play, remember that its roots lie in a tradition where the audience's voice was as important as the actors, making theatre a lively, communal celebration of human creativity. You're now witnessing the twilight of Dionysian theatre, a slow fading of the once vibrant tradition as cultural tides shift and new forms of entertainment emerge. Imagine the bustling amphitheatres growing quieter over time, the chorus's songs less frequent, and the grand festivals losing some of their former glory. The reasons for this decline are many and intertwined, reflecting changes in politics, religion, and society. One key factor was the rise of new religious beliefs, particularly Christianity, which viewed the pagan rituals and theatrical performances with suspicion or outright hostility. As Christian influence spread through the Roman Empire, many of the old festivals were banned or fell out of favour, and theatres were repurposed or abandoned. Historians still argue about how quickly and thoroughly this decline happened. Some suggest it was a gradual transformation, with theatre evolving into new medieval forms, while others see it as a more abrupt end to the classical tradition. Another factor was the changing tastes of audiences. As the Roman Empire expanded, entertainment shifted towards spectacles like gladiatorial games and chariot races, which offered more visceral thrills. Theatre, with its emphasis on dialogue and ritual, struggled to compete. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient theatres were converted into fortresses or even quarries, their stones repurposed for building projects. It's a poetic, if somewhat melancholy, reminder of how cultural priorities change over time. Despite this decline, the legacy of Dionysian theatre lived on, influencing medieval mystery plays, Renaissance drama, and eventually modern theatre. The themes, structures, and techniques developed in ancient Greece continued to inspire artists for centuries. As you imagine the echoes of ancient performances fading into history, you realize that while the theatres may have fallen silent, the spirit of Dionysus's invention endures, waiting to be rediscovered and reimagined by each new generation. So, the decline of Dionysian theatre is not an end but a transformation, a quiet passing of the torch that keeps the flame of storytelling alive. You're now stepping into the vibrant world of modern theatre, where the ancient legacy of Dionysus continues to pulse beneath the surface of every performance. Imagine how the seeds, planted by a bored god millennia ago, have blossomed into countless forms: Shakespearean drama, Broadway musicals, experimental theatre, and even film and television. Modern theatre owes much to the innovations of ancient Greece: the use of masks, the chorus's narrative role, the exploration of human emotions, and the blending of music, dance, and storytelling. Directors and playwrights still draw inspiration from the themes of fate, identity, and the divine versus the mortal, exploring these timeless questions in new contexts. Historians and theatre scholars often trace a direct line from Dionysian festivals to contemporary performance art, highlighting how theatre remains a space for communal experience, reflection, and transformation. The ritualistic origins remind us that theatre is not just entertainment, but a powerful tool for empathy and understanding. Here's a quirky tidbit. Many modern actors and theatre companies still refer to themselves as thespians, honouring Thespis, the first actor who stepped out of the chorus to bring individual characters to life. This connection to ancient tradition adds a layer of meaning and pride to the craft. As you watch a modern play or musical, you might notice echoes of ancient technique choral moments, symbolic masks, or the use of music and dance to heighten emotion. These elements link us to a shared human history of storytelling that spans continents and centuries. So, from the restless god Dionysus's boredom to the dazzling stages of today, theatre remains a living art form, continually reinventing itself while honouring its ancient roots. It's a testament to the enduring power of stories to connect us, entertain us, and help us understand the world and ourselves. You're now exploring the fascinating role of theatre education and scholarship in preserving and revitalizing the ancient traditions of Dionysian drama. Imagine universities and theatre companies around the world delving into dusty manuscripts, reconstructing lost plays, and experimenting with ancient staging techniques to bring the spirit of Greek theatre alive for modern audiences. Scholars use archaeological findings, ancient texts, and historical records to piece together how performances might have looked and sounded. This research informs everything from academic courses to professional productions, ensuring that the legacy of Dionysus's invention is not just a relic, but a living, evolving art. Historians still debate many details, such as the exact nature of the music, the choreography of the chorus, or the precise construction of masks. But these questions fuel ongoing inquiry and creativity. Each new discovery can reshape our understanding of ancient theatre and inspire innovative interpretations. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some modern productions have experimented with using actual ancient instruments reconstructed from archaeological finds, giving audiences a rare chance to hear the sounds that might have accompanied the original performances. Others have revived the practice of chorus movement based on classical dance manuals, blending scholarship with artistry. Theatre education also emphasizes the social and cultural contexts of ancient plays, helping students and audiences appreciate how these works engaged with issues of politics, gender, religion, and community. This holistic approach deepens our connection to the past and enriches contemporary performance. As you imagine these dedicated scholars and artists working behind the scenes, you realize that the story of Dionysian theatre is far from over. It continues to inspire curiosity, debate, and creativity, bridging ancient wisdom and modern expression. So, the legacy of Dionysus's boredom-fueled invention thrives not only on stage, but also in classrooms and research centres, ensuring that the magic of ancient theatre continues to illuminate our world. You're now delving into the fascinating interplay between ancient Greek theatre and modern psychology, exploring how the Dionysian tradition anticipated concepts that continue to captivate minds today. Imagine the ancient stages as early laboratories for understanding human emotion, identity, and the subconscious, where actors and audiences alike engaged in a collective exploration of the psyche. The rituals and performances associated with Dionysus involved altered states of consciousness through music, dance, and intoxication that mirror what modern psychology identifies as trance or flow states. These experiences facilitated emotional release and transformation, much like the catharsis Aristotle described in his Poetics. Historians and psychologists debate the extent to which these theatrical rituals functioned as early forms of therapy or social cohesion. The chorus's role, for example, can be seen as a communal voice that helps individuals process complex emotions and societal tensions. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some contemporary theatre therapists draw inspiration from ancient practices, using role-play, mask work, and group chanting to help clients explore identity and heal emotional wounds. This modern echo of Dionysian theatre underscores its enduring psychological power. The themes of Greek drama fate versus free will, madness, revenge, and redemption resonate deeply with universal human experiences, offering timeless insights into the complexities of the mind and heart. As you reflect on this connection, you realize that Dionysus's invention was not just entertainment, but a profound exploration of what it means to be human, a space where stories become mirrors for our inner lives. So, the ancient theatre's legacy extends beyond art and culture into the realms of psychology and healing, reminding us that storytelling is a powerful tool for understanding ourselves and each other. You're now stepping into the vibrant world of theatrical festivals beyond Greece, where the spirit of Dionysus's invention inspired diverse cultures to develop their own dramatic traditions. Imagine how the essence of Greek theaterit's blending of ritual, storytelling, music, and communal experience found echoes in the festivals of Rome, India, Japan, and beyond. In Rome, for instance, theatrical performances became grand spectacles with elaborate sets and costumes, incorporating Greek plays but also developing unique forms like mime and pantomime. The Romans adapted the chorus and masks, but emphasized spectacle and entertainment, reflecting their cultural tastes. Across the world, from the Sanskrit dramas of India's classical period to Japan's No and Kabuki theatres, you can trace the influence of ritualistic performance and masked storytelling. While these traditions evolved independently, they share with Greek theatre a deep connection to spirituality, community, and the exploration of human nature. Historians and anthropologists study these parallels to understand how theatre serves as a universal human expression, shaped by local beliefs and customs, but united by common themes and functions. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the ancient Greek chorus and Japanese no chorus share surprising similarities in their role as narrators and commentators, despite arising in vastly different cultures and times. As you imagine these global theatrical traditions, you realize that Dionysus's spark of creativity ignited a worldwide flame, inspiring countless generations to use performance as a way to connect, question, and celebrate. So, from the hills of Athens to the stages of the world, the legacy of ancient theatre continues to thrive, reminding us of our shared humanity and the power of stories to transcend boundaries. You're now exploring the fascinating relationship between ancient Greek theatre and visual arts, where the stories of Dionysus and his dramas inspired painters, sculptors, and potters to create vivid images that captured the spirit of the stage. Imagine walking through an ancient marketplace or a wealthy home, surrounded by pottery, adorned with scenes from famous plays, or statues that embody the emotions of tragic heroes and comedic fools. Greek vase paintings often depict moments from well-known myths and theatrical performances, providing valuable clues about costumes, masks, and gestures used by actors. These artworks serve as a visual record, complementing the written texts and helping historians reconstruct the theatrical experience. Historians still debate how closely these images reflect actual stage practices versus idealized or symbolic representations. Nonetheless, the interplay between theatre and visual art enriched both forms, creating a vibrant cultural dialogue. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some pottery shows choruses in mid-dance, their flowing robes and synchronized movements frozen in time, offering a glimpse into the dynamic energy of ancient performances. Others depict the mechaneith crane used for deus ex machina, moments highlighting the technical ingenuity behind the scenes. Sculptors also captured the intense emotions of theatrical characters, from the anguish of Oedipus to the sly grin of a comedic mask, influencing later artistic traditions in portraiture and drama. As you imagine these artworks, you realize that theatre's influence extended beyond the stage, shaping how ancient Greeks visualized and understood their myths and themselves. So, Dionysus's invention didn't just create stories, it inspired a rich visual culture that celebrated the power of performance and the human experience. You're now examining the enduring influence of ancient Greek theatre on literature, where the structures, themes, and characters born from Dionysus's stages have permeated storytelling across millennia. Imagine how Shakespeare's tragedies echo Aeschylus, how modern novelists explore themes of fate and free will, or how countless poems and plays grapple with the human condition in ways first articulated by Sophocles and Euripides. The concepts of catharsis, tragic flaw, hamartia, and the epic journey of a hero facing insurmountable odds are direct legacies of Greek drama. Playwrights, poets, and novelists continue to draw on these foundational ideas, adapting them to new settings and sensibilities. Historians and literary critics consistently highlight the Greek influence on Western literature, viewing the plays as foundational texts that shaped narrative structures and character development for centuries to come. Here's a quirky tidbit. Even today, many high school and college drama programs stage Greek tragedies, not just as historical exercises, but as living dramas that still powerfully convey universal truths about human nature and society. This direct engagement ensures the literary legacy remains vibrant. As you trace these literary connections, you realize that Dionysus's invention wasn't just a passing fad, but a profound wellspring of inspiration that continues to shape how we understand and tell stories. So, from the ancient stages to the contemporary page, the spirit of Greek theatre lives on, reminding us that the deepest questions and most compelling narratives often have ancient roots. You're now turning your attention to the role of masks in ancient Greek theatre, fascinating blend of art, function, and symbolism that helped shape the very identity of the performance. Imagine actors donning large, exaggerated masks that transform their faces into archetypes: the tragic hero, the cunning slave, the foolish old man, or the divine god. These masks were not mere props, but essential tools that allowed a handful of performers to portray multiple characters and convey emotions to vast audiences. Masks amplified the actor's voice through built-in megaphone-like structures, making their speech audible across the sprawling amphitheatres. Their exaggerated features made it easier for spectators, even those seated far away, to identify characters and grasp their emotional states instantly. Historians still debate the exact materials and crafting techniques used, but many masks were made from lightweight materials like linen, wood, or cork, painted vividly to catch the eye. The design often included movable mouths or eyes to enhance expressiveness, though this is still a subject of scholarly inquiry. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some masks were so large and elaborate that actors had to learn special physical movements to avoid tripping or losing balance, turning the performance into a kind of dance. The masks also symbolized the concept of personae mask we wear in society, highlighting theatre's exploration of identity and transformation. As you imagine the actors stepping onto the stage, their faces hidden behind these powerful masks, you realize that Greek theatre was as much about visual storytelling as it was about words. The masks created a universal language of emotion and character, bridging the gap between performer and audience. So, Dionysus's invention wasn't just about stories, it was about creating a vivid, immersive world where masks allowed humans to become gods, heroes, and fools, exploring the many facets of existence. You're now exploring the fascinating evolution of comedy in ancient Greek theatre, a genre that, like tragedy, was born from Dionysus's restless creativity but took a distinctly different path. Imagine the amphitheatres filled with laughter as actors and chorus members poke fun at politicians, social norms, and even the gods themselves, using sharp wit, slapstick, and clever wordplay. Comedy in ancient Greece was not just light entertainment, it was a powerful form of social commentary. Old comedy, exemplified by playwrights like Aristophanes, was bold and often outrageous, fearlessly satirizing public figures and current events. These plays could be bawdy, irreverent, and wildly imaginative, reflecting the democratic spirit of Athens by giving voice to popular opinion and dissent. Historians still debate how audiences balanced the humour with respect for sacred traditions, but the laughter was clearly a communal release, a way to cope with the tensions of political life and human folly. Here's a quirky tidbit. Aristophanes once mocked the philosopher Socrates in a play called The Clouds, portraying him as a ridiculous figure who confuses and corrupts the youth. This kind of theatrical roasting shows how comedy served as a public forum for debate and critique. Later, new comedy shifted focus from political satire to domestic and romantic plots, influencing Roman playwrights like Plautus and Terence, and eventually shaping the foundation of modern comedic storytelling. As you imagine the lively chorus singing and dancing, the actors delivering punchlines, and the audience roaring with laughter, you realize that comedy was a vital counterpart to tragedy, balancing the emotional spectrum of theatre. So, Dionysus's invention gave birth not only to profound tragedy, but also to joyous, incisive comedy, reminding us that laughter is a powerful way to understand ourselves and the world. You're now delving into the architectural marvels of ancient Greek theatres, where the physical spaces themselves were masterpieces that shaped the theatrical experience. Imagine vast, open-air amphitheatres carved into hillsides, their tiered stone seats rising in perfect arcs to provide every spectator with an unobstructed view and excellent acoustics. The design of these theatres was both practical and symbolic. The circular orchestra space, where the chorus performed, was the heart of the theatre, representing the communal and ritual origins of the art form. Surrounding it, the theatron, literally viewing place, accommodated thousands, reflecting the democratic ethos of Athens, where citizens gathered to witness and participate in cultural life. Historians and archaeologists continued to study these structures, uncovering details about their construction, materials, and modifications over time. The theatre of Dionysus in Athens, considered the birthplace of Greek drama, could seat up to 17,000 people, making it one of the largest performance spaces of the ancient world. Here's a quirky tidbit. The ancient Greeks ingeniously used the natural landscape to enhance sound projection, allowing actors' voices to carry clearly without microphones or amplification. The shape of the theatre and the materials used helped create a natural amphitheatre effect that modern architects still admire. Theatres also featured elaborate stage machinery, such as the mechane for Deus Ex Machina effects and the ecklima, a wheeled platform used to reveal scenes or characters hidden from view. These innovations added layers of spectacle and surprise to performances. As you imagine sitting among thousands of spectators under the open sky, surrounded by the energy of the chorus and actors, you realize that the architecture itself was a vital character in the drama, shaping how stories were told and experienced. So, Dionysus's invention extended beyond scripts and actorsit, encompassed the very spaces that brought communities together to celebrate, reflect, and be transformed.